You will hear a conversation between an assistant at a health club and a man who wants to join the club. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5.
Hi, can I help you?
Hello. Yes, is your club taking on new members at the moment?
Oh, yes. We're always interested in taking on new members. Just give me a moment and I'll get an application form. Right, here we are. So, let's start with your name.
It's Harry.
OK. And your surname?
It's Simons.
Is that like Simon with an S?
No, it's Symonds. Most people find it rather difficult to spell.
I see. It has a silent D. I guess a lot of people miss that. Now, let me see. Can you tell me when you were born?
Yes, certainly. The 11th of December.
Thanks. And the year?
1996.
OK, good. Now, are you thinking of becoming a full-time member?
Probably not. What kind of memberships do you have?
Well, we also have off-peak membership, which is between 9 and 12 in the morning and 2 and 5 in the afternoon. And then we do have a weekend membership.
So a weekend membership is just Saturday and Sunday?
Yes, that's right.
OK. Well, that's not going to work for me. It looks like I'll have to be full-time. I'm afraid off-peak membership won't do, as I'm not free at those times, and I don't just want to be restricted to weekends.
OK, I'll make a note of that. Right, we have several facilities at the club, including a gym, a swimming pool, tennis and squash courts. What activities are you planning on doing?
Well, do you have badminton?
Yes, we do.
And table tennis?
I'm afraid not. Well, not at the moment, anyway.
Oh, OK. Well, I'm also very keen on swimming, so I'm glad you have a pool. I'll certainly be doing a lot of that.
OK, I've got that. Will you be using the gym?
No, I'm not interested in that.
OK. So just let me work out what the cost will be. Yes, that comes to £450 for the year. You can choose to pay annually for the full year or monthly. It's up to you.
Oh, I'd prefer to pay regularly in small amounts, rather than have a large amount to pay in one go, if that's OK.
Sure, that's fine. Right, I've got the most important details for now.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you will have some time to look at the questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
So, I'd just like to ask you a few questions about your lifestyle, if that's OK with you.
Yes, that's fine.
Do you do any regular exercise at the moment?
Yes, I do a bit.
Good. And what do you do?
Well, every few days I go jogging.
Yes, that's good. How long do you go for?
Well, it varies. I guess it depends on how energetic I'm feeling.
Yes, of course. Every little bit helps. Do you have any injuries at the moment?
Well, I did break a bone in my foot playing football a long time ago, but that's all healed up now. But in the last few days, I've realised I have a bad ankle. I think I must have injured it last week, and it's a bit sore now. But apart from that, I'm fine.
Right. I guess you might need to rest it for a few days to let it recover.
Yes, I will.
So, let me just ask you what you want to achieve by joining the club. Do you have any targets or goals?
Well, I suppose my main aim is to build up my fitness level. Is that the kind of thing you mean?
Yes, that's fine. All the activities you're going to be doing should certainly help you with that.
OK.
And could you tell me what you do for a living?
Well, I was a student up until recently.
OK. So what are you doing at the moment?
Well, I'm a charity worker.
Oh, that's fine. I'll write that down. OK, nearly done. One last question. Can I ask how you heard about the club? Did you see it advertised or did you go to our website, for example?
Well, I've been looking for a health club for a while, and I asked my friends for suggestions, but they weren't much help. And then I was listening to the radio, and your club was mentioned. So I thought, I'll go along and see what it's like.
Great. Well, we look forward to having you as a member.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2. You will hear a hotel manager talking to her staff about the arrangements for an event to be held at the weekend. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all feeling okay after the activities of the last week or so. I know you've all been working very hard recently, and we've been exceptionally busy, especially with the wedding last weekend and the trade fair straight after that. And now we have only 3 days to prepare for the birthday party this weekend. The events recently have gone extremely well, and the hotel is beginning to get a very good reputation, so we need to keep it up. At the moment, we don't have exact numbers of guests, and though we usually only cater for groups of less than 50, we will have quite a few more than that. So, as I said, not sure of numbers, but of course we won't go over the maximum of 100. But it's likely that we will need all of you to work this weekend, so if any of you can't, please let me know as soon as possible. Right, so what time will the event start? Well, the invitation says guests should arrive between 7:30 and 7:45, but our experience is that there are always a few who like to arrive early, so we'll expect the first people at 7:15. As the numbers are quite large, this will certainly be the case. Food will be served at around 8:30, and then, depending on how long the meal takes, the entertainment will start about 2 hours later. Now, for this, we were expecting a live band for the occasion, which is always fun. But apparently this has been cancelled due to illness. So, the hosts know someone who is a comedian who will be replacing the band. We had hoped that the resident magician who worked here through the summer would be able to help out, but they weren't keen on that idea.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you will have some time to look at the questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
So, I'd just like to go through who's doing what when the guests arrive, and I think we'll make a few changes from the last party held here. If I remember correctly, it was Olav who coordinated the task of providing the guests with drinks. Or was it Ahmed? I'm not sure. But Gary asked to do it this time, so that will be his job. There's been no decision yet on what the drinks are going to be, but I hope they decide soon in case we need to order something special. Now, for receiving the guests' coats and hats, it's important we have someone experienced doing this, as we don't want guests losing their belongings. And Monica, last time this was your responsibility. Susan, I know you wanted to do this, but as the numbers are quite high for this event, I won't make a change here. Right. Now, last time there was some confusion as to where guests were supposed to go once they had deposited their things, and we had guests roaming around the whole hotel. So, Ahmed and Olav, I believe you discussed the problems with Susan and thought she would be good at guiding guests after they had arrived. And I'm fine with that. Right, and now for some general instructions. Once the guests have arrived, they will be in and around the lounge area, and then at around 8:30, we need to get them to move to the restaurant for their meal. This often proves difficult and can take a long time, so I will ring a bell so that everyone knows it's time to eat. Hopefully, this will speed things up a bit. Also, for this event, there'll be a seating plan, so the guests won't be able to decide for themselves where to sit. They'll have to sit according to the plan. There will be a plan on each table, and I've been thinking about where to put the master plan so everyone can view it before they enter the restaurant. As they'll be spending quite a while in the lounge, I've decided to also put a plan there. This should speed up the start of the meal. Once the meal starts, you'll all be very busy waiting on the tables, and I'm sure I don't need to tell you to be good-humoured and polite to all the guests. The organiser of the event will be saying a few words, and so will two of his colleagues. So, when the speeches start, all activity must stop in the restaurant, so that the three people giving them can be heard. This shouldn't take long, and it should be towards the end of the meal. After that, the guests will move back to the lounge for the entertainment. So, I think that's it. Any questions? Come and see me later.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
You will hear two students discussing a presentation they are going to give. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25.
Hi, Robert.
Hi. Sorry I'm late. I was just printing off some pages about food waste in Britain.
Do you want to include Britain in the presentation? I thought we were concentrating on the USA.
Well, it is a global problem, so I thought we ought to provide some statistics that show that.
Fair enough. What did you find out?
Well, I was looking at a British study from 2013. It basically concluded that 12 billion pounds worth of food and drink was thrown away each year, all of it ending up in landfill sites. Over 8 million tons. And that wasn't including packaging.
An incredible amount.
Yes, and they were only looking at what households threw away, so there's no information about restaurants and the catering industry. But one thing the study did investigate was the amount of milk and soft drinks that were wasted, and I think it was probably quite unique in that respect.
Interesting. You know, in the other European reports I've read, there's one thing they have in common when they talk about carbon dioxide emissions.
I know what you are going to say. They never refer to the fuel that farms and factories require to produce the food, and the carbon dioxide that releases?
Exactly. We could really cut down on carbon emissions if less food was supplied in the first place. To my mind, The reports talk too much about the carbon dioxide produced by the trucks that deliver the fresh goods to the shops and take the waste away. They forget about one of the key causes of carbon dioxide.
Absolutely. If the reports are actually going to be useful to people, they need to be more comprehensive.
Who do you mean by people?
Well, the government, industries, people making television programs. Have you seen any documentaries about food waste?
Not that I remember.
My point exactly. These days, they all seem to be focusing on where your meat, fruit, and vegetables are sourced from. We're being encouraged to buy locally, not from overseas. That's probably a good thing, but I'd still like to see something about waste.
Yes, it's the same with magazine articles. It's all about fat and sugar content and the kind of additives and coloring in food, but nothing about how it reaches your table and what happens after it ends up in the bin.
Well, we've only got 15 minutes for this presentation, so I think we'll have to limit what we say about the consequences of food waste. What do we want to concentrate on?
Well, I know some of the other presentations are looking at food and farming methods and what they do to the environment. So I think we'll avoid that. And the fact that in some countries, people can't afford the food grown on their own farms. That was covered last term.
Okay, we don't want to repeat stuff.
What concerns me above all else is that in a recession, governments should be encouraging business to find ways to cut costs. Apparently, supermarkets in the USA lose about 11% of their fruit to waste. That's throwing money away.
All right, we'll focus on that problem. It should get the others' attention anyway. Now, how do you want to begin the presentation? Let's not start with statistics, though, because that's what everybody does.
I agree. How about we give the other students a set of questions to answer about what they suspect they waste every day?
I'm fine with that. Probably a better option than showing pictures of landfill sites. It'll be more personalized that way.
All right. Now let's start.
Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
Okay, shall we now have a look at the projects that different researchers and organizations are working on?
For me, the project I really liked was the one at Tufts University. You know, where they've invented tiny edible patches to stick on fresh foods that show you what level of bacteria is present, and so whether you can still eat it.
It's a great idea, as it tells you if you need to hurry up and eat the food before it goes off. The other good thing about the patches is that apparently they'll be cheap to manufacture.
Good. Then the other thing I thought was great was the Massachusetts Institute of Technology project.
I hadn't seen that.
Well, they've developed these sensors that can detect tiny amounts of ethylene. Ethylene is the natural plant hormone in fruit that makes them turn ripe, apparently. The researchers think that they can attach the sensors to cardboard boxes, and then supermarkets can scan the sensors with a portable device to see how ripe the fruit inside is. That's got to be a quicker way to check for ripeness than taking each box off the shelf and opening it.
Definitely. And I thought that Lean Path was worth mentioning too. Their waste tracking technology means that caterers can see how much food is being wasted and why. That'll increase profits for them eventually.
Yes. And did you read about 0%? They've produced this smartphone application that allows restaurants to send donation alerts to food charities. The charities can then pick up the unwanted food and distribute it to people in need.
In the long run, that'll definitely benefit poorer families in the neighborhood. No kid should go to school hungry.
I agree. And I read that quite a few local governments in the USA are thinking about introducing compulsory composting in their states. So you can't put any food waste into your rubbish bins, just the compost bin.
Well, I guess that means a bit more work for people. I mean, they have to separate the organic and inorganic waste themselves before they take it out to the compost bin, and you know how lazy some people are. But I guess if we all start composting, we'd be doing something positive about the problem of food waste ourselves, rather than relying on the government to sort it out. Having said that, not everyone has a garden, so I guess...
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 4. You will hear a lecture about Maori kite making. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Well, good morning, everyone. As you know, we've been looking at different kinds of art and craft that were practiced by the Maori people of New Zealand, at least before the Europeans began to arrive in the 18th century. So, the focus of this lecture is kite making, how the kites were made, their appearance, and the purposes they served. Well, let's start with the way they were made. As with other Maori artistic traditions, kite making involved certain rituals. So, firstly, only priests were allowed to fly and handle the largest, most sacred kites. There were rules too, for the size and scale of the kites that the priests had to follow, and during the preparation of both small and large kites, food was strictly forbidden. In terms of appearance, kites were frequently designed in the image of a native bird, or a Maori god, and sometimes, perhaps less often, a well-known hero. You can imagine that when Maori first arrived in the new country, in New Zealand, it may have taken some time to find suitable materials for their kites. But, through trial and error no doubt, they found plants and trees that provided bark and even roots that they could use to make the frames and wings of their kites. And after the frame had been constructed, the kite then had to be decorated. For this, the priests used long grasses, and these, when the kite was in the air, would stream along behind it. They also used a variety of feathers to add colour to their creations. Well, all this meant it was easy to see a kite in the sky, but you could also hear Maori kites. They could be quite noisy indeed, and this was because some priests liked to hang a long row of shells from the kite. You can imagine how they'd rattle and clatter in the wind, how they might completely capture your attention. As I said before, the most common image was probably a bird, and that's the same for other kite-making cultures. But the kites were designed in particular shapes. So, there were kites that were triangular, rectangular, and also shaped like a diamond. And some of them were so large it would actually require several men to operate them. Some of the kites were also covered in patterns, and to make these patterns, the Maori used different pigments of red and black, and these were either made from a charcoal base or from red-brown clay which had been combined with oil obtained from a local species of shark. Now, before I forget, if you have a chance, do visit the Auckland Museum, because they have the last surviving Birdman kite on display. This is the kind of kite that has a wooden mask at the top of the frame. It's a mask of a human head, and you can clearly see it has a tattoo and also a set of teeth. Quite impressive, and a good example of Maori craftsmanship and symbolism. Right, turning to the purpose and function of the kites. They certainly had multiple uses. Primarily, the flying of kites was a way of communicating with the gods, and when the kites rose into the air, the Maori used them to deliver messages, perhaps requesting a good harvest, good fortune in war, a successful hunting expedition. So these kites were incredibly valuable to a community, treasured objects that one generation would pass to the next. People would also fly kites for other reasons. For example, to attract the attention of a neighbouring village. This was done when a meeting was required between Maori elders, a convenient method indeed. And finally, when it comes to war, there are traditional stories that describe how when a Maori warrior found himself surrounded by his enemies, a kite could actually provide the possibility of escape. The kites were powerful enough to take a man up into the air, and for this reason, they could also be used to lower him into enemy fortifications so that an attack could begin from the inside. Well, I'm happy to say there seems to be a revival and growing interest in kite making, and